All right. Sorry, we are 2 minutes late. Welcome everybody today to a webinar presented by both Augintel and AWS. Hi, everybody. I'm Marty Lisko, CEO of Augintel. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we're going to cover the topic of digital transformation in health and human services. And with so many modernization initiatives happening across health and human services, many supported by federal funding as well, digital transformation is a really hot topic. But what does that mean to social services organizations and what's its potential impact? Today, we're joined by three individuals. The first is Natasha Nikolai from AWS. She's the public sector, state and local government, data and digital transformation leader at AWS. Before AWS, Natasha served as the chief data strategist and deputy director of research, automation, and data for the California Department of Social Services. And then prior to that, she worked as a policy researcher at Mathematica and spent time as California's TANF director. Natasha is going to start off with the question of what is transformation and its potential impact to agencies. Then she'll delve a little bit into how to get started today with digital transformation, speaking about Augintel's technology as one example of how states can make data, both structured data and unstructured data, a more impactful tool for caring and making decisions about children and families. Then, after we spend about 15 minutes in that area, we'll transfer over to Jim Lindstrom and myself. Jim is Augintel's VP of Engineering. Jim and I will dive into natural language processing as an element of digital transformation and as a high impact step to modernizing data across your organization. Then we'll follow in the last third of the meeting with John Velasquez. John Velasquez is the modernization partner lead at AWS on the digital transformation team working in state and local US government. And John will look at a variety of different ways that Augintel technology and other digital transformation technologies can be applied across health and human services and look at the impact and maybe a case study or two on the impact of that today. And last, we will make sure that we leave time for Q&A. So if you have questions that come up during the presentation, feel free to put it in the Q&A and we'll try to address it either in line with the conversation or at the end. So thank you everybody again for attending today. And with that, I'll hand it over to Natasha to talk about digital transformation. Thanks, Natasha.
Great. Thanks so much, Marty, and thanks everyone for being here. By way of finishing out my introduction, I'll just let you know that I have a background in both hard sciences and social sciences, including biology, orthopedics, brain science, behavioral economics, decision-making, two-generational approaches to poverty. Basically about 20 years in my career obsessing about data and analytics, first learning all the pitfalls about how legacy technology and legacy thinking that went with those technologies limits our ability to provide holistic outcomes and clear data decision capabilities across what I would consider core areas of interdependent government services like health and human services. And now over the past few years, really watching technology solve for so many of those issues that government faces to provide better experiences and to accelerate our abilities to access more data-driven decisions, but then not get adopted effectively because of legacy thinking that's still getting in the way. Technology advancements today are game-changing. They completely allow departments and programs to collaborate and coordinate engagement in ways we could really only dream of 10 years ago. And literally, we were dreaming about these things 10 years ago when CMS first put out interoperability requirements for Medicaid. The issue was that 10 years ago, interoperability was still super hard. Modularity still had a lot of limitations, and working with large data sets or system design required deep knowledge of computers and programming. This led to a lot of, as we say, sort of one-way door decisions, things that were big and expensive and hard to undo once they were done. Well, what's fun is that times have changed, right? Technology has changed, but as I work all across the country with states who are trying to innovate, to change the mindset and the people and the process, we still see a lot of lagging behind. So Here at AWS, I lead this team of implementation and technology specialists who work with innovative states and forward-thinking programs to update those practices, to change paradigms and processes that reflect advancements in technology and really allow us to do different things today. We spend a lot of time thinking about creating and coaching programs to support state and local government customers to explore what is digital transformation. And what are the ways that we can really use digital transformation in SLG to reduce risks and barriers, to execute iteratively, and to make more meaningful progress. So next slide. So while we know that what customers are trying to get to, we hear this all across the country, right? We know that states are really trying to improve constituent experience by speeding up access to services, improving enrollment processes, providing more agency and self-serve offerings to enhance staff productivity by automating workflows, getting the right data to the right people at the right time, to change decisions and enhance experiences, to reduce risk and human error by elevating intelligent search and federated access, and to enable leadership to make better decisions that are data-driven more quickly, meet compliance and regulatory frameworks with confidence, adapt to the constantly changing policy landscape, all without costing tens of millions of dollars and taking multiple years. We know that there are the same barriers getting in the way over and over and over again. Everyone's trying to do more with less. Demand is increasing, but funding and staffing aren't increasing at the same rates. Constituents and workers expect more modern experiences, but states don't have the capabilities to deliver. Aging infrastructure and outdated procurement models slow everything down. And prevent these kind of fast cycles of learning and incremental change or improvement. And between security, privacy, and compliance changes and generally risk-averse cultures, we see this regression to the mean. And even the most well-intentioned and innovative people just keep going back to the way we've always done it. Similarly, from the data side, we see limited analytics capabilities and limited data sharing, poor data quality and lack of governance models, and of course, lots of ad hoc processes, all leading to inconsistency, poor trust, limited confidence, and lack of really future thinking investment. Next slide. So this is where we hope that we do see some patterns of success to help government become more data driven. And in our program, what I've designed is really a way to work with states to demonstrate the art of the possible. Our motto is think big, start small, and scale fast, all aiming to improve user experiences and accelerate government ability to use data as an asset and to drive and sustain learning and innovation. So we see success in doing this by pausing long enough to get people and process realigned, to educate folks around both technology advancements and to set the right think big North Star policy goals by bringing together data and technology leaders, by upskilling and empowering workers, and most importantly, by changing the way we understand, build, and invest in technology. Next slide. So when I first started as the Chief Data Officer overseeing all of social services for the state of California, this was the data lifecycle model. In fact, I picked up a textbook and I read about it. It was the most recently released data science and analytics book I could find in public policy. And it was such a simple model, right? Capture, curate, infer. It made sense. It was kind of revolutionary at the time. It was all about the time. It was around the time of ETL and connecting canonical data models across relational databases to set us up for analytics and insights. Next slide. Well, oh my gosh, how the world has changed in 5 years. Technology has evolved at hyperspeed to get more and more specialized around how we think about ingesting and storing and processing and transforming and analyzing data. And right now, we're so far beyond just SQL databases and ETL concepts. And it always pains me to see how many states and programs are still thinking and procuring under those legacy constraints and processes. Look, if that's where you're at, it's okay. We can still help. It's not too late. And I won't bore you with all the details on this particular slide, but just know we have tons of tools, advantaged capabilities that you can use to set yourself up for success, hundreds of them. And we help coach you through how to pick them and how to implement them. And you'll see some of that later today. Next slide. And we know that incrementally applying those tools to this new mental model for flexibly managing the data lifecycle is a great way to get started, no matter where you're at. Next slide. So the key is that we lead with people in process. Understanding how you take strategic approaches and update paradigms to make meaningful steps towards better serving constituents and families with updated technology investments is really important. Go ahead and keep clicking through this one. So I would encourage you, don't believe everything you hear about the black box or the one-size-fits-all approach to solving, quote, all your data needs, right? You really have to step back, lead with outcomes and policy goals in mind, take incremental steps to shift people and process, and then to use modern build and investment strategies to change the way that you deliver those services over time. Next slide. And so when we stop to think about how do you get started and what does that mean, go ahead and keep going. We really want to think about anticipation and intentionality, right? So digital transformation, whole hog, redesigning entire systems, we know it takes time. The good news is we also know that modernization projects can get started right away. They can be low risk by using best practices and those updated mental models that advancements in cloud technology allow for. And that by updating data use frameworks and digitizing constituent touch points and worker touch points, and allowing for automation, you can do more with less, right? These modern data architectures really allow for you to take this building block approach with staging and whatever speed you want. That said, right, connecting these things together, there's no magic. The magic is sort of in the arrows, but really that's just applied expertise. That's what my team brings to states. It's what teams like Marty and Augintel bring to states. Really advancements and allowing those cloud capabilities to be consumed using ML. But you have to want to do that, right? You have to want to take a step back and not just go back to the way we always did things, right? So it means you have to change the mindset. You have to update the people and process. Only then can you really have these technologies and advancements reflected in the way that people do business. And you can mobilize at that point and execute on those approaches. And so we spend a lot of time really thinking this through, really working and partnering and collaborating with states to get that value and to understand what that North Star is, that we're trying to bring together services and serve families better and protect kids and advance adults and their capabilities, et cetera. Next slide. And so that all begins by agreeing first and foremost that we're not building one of these anymore. We really have to move away from this idea of $100 million, 5-year-long procurements where we are purposefully tying applications and databases together over and over again. Next slide. How did we get here? Just like that, by constantly procuring silos on purpose. We're still doing it. I see RFPs released on a daily basis where this is still the common practice. We take code and configuration, we tie it to data warehouses, and we procure these updated program systems. It perpetuates the silos. Whole departments have siloed programs purposefully, right? Intentionally collecting and ingesting and administering data tied to SQL databases. We've got to stop. Next slide. We have better ideas now around what a platonic ideal future state looks like for government. How can you take and piece part this and building block it out and do it safely and iterate and learn? We know how to do that from a digital experience perspective. We have tools and toys now that allow for you to do that from applied data strategy perspective. We have really cool tools and superpowers and partners like Augintel that know how to take certain kinds of data and really extract the value right now today without having to completely transform the whole system. And you can keep doing that iteratively. Next slide. And we know that sometimes that's going to look like, consolidating these things. Sometimes you're going to have to bring that historical data in. It's all okay, right? There's no one size fits all. There's no predetermined way you have to do this, right? But you do want to do things that add value immediately. You want to meet policy goals. To get adoption and adaption, you have to add value. Now, our value add in a lot of ways is that we take these modern architecture principles, we make it safe, we reduce the risk, we leverage advancements in cloud technology to make it available to you in these sort of managed ways so that you can auto scale, so that you can have purpose-built data structures, so that you can have unified rules that govern those environments securely. You can put unstructured data, like Marty said, into the right kind of database and start extracting value right away. And you can decouple or loosely configure those systems so that as the next best thing comes along, as your next point of readiness to continue to evolve is made available, you can plug it in like a Lego to that system, and you can start driving value right away. So we use these best practices on the next slide here to reduce, the risk, to approach and sort of get over your reasonable fears. No vendor lock-in. How do I make sure I have access to the cool new technology? Well, we use micro and macro services, component-based architecture to be agile. We avoid those silos. We don't stop buying dependent monolith systems, right? We decouple and loosely configure these things so that we have operational efficiency and flexibility. How do you do more with less? How do you do more with fewer staff? Well, you use automation. We use ML and AI tools that have been around, by the way, since the 70s and since the very first releases of AWS tools in 2007 to automate and to use machine learning, right? And then you make sure that your friends and neighbors across departments and programs can use the same tools. Not everyone has to keep reinventing the wheel. We use infrastructure as code and containers and metadata best practices for governance to make sure there's standard practices that you can look back and see what happened, that other people can use the same enterprise scale technology that you have. And ultimately, all of that leads to this kind of layered approach. Go ahead and go right to the next slide. This kind of layered approach around modern foundational data architectures, where you can look at this and you can start to change your practices wherever you're at today, right? You can start to extract that value from structured and unstructured data. You can build modern foundational architectures using tools and toys. Next slide, you can do that using AWS native services. But more importantly, we have gone out and found partners in the landscape that do some of these things really, really well. And then you can have them as managed services right out of the box. Augintel is an incredible example of taking structured and unstructured data, especially from case notes and narrative notes, and processing that in using AI and ML technologies, prepping and enriching that data so that it's more ready for consumption and providing immediate insights, right? Augintel is an excellent example of how to use incremental transformation, best of breed, tools and toys to help meet your needs and start extracting value right away, and to start doing it very safely, right? Without having to think about, building a battleship. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Marty and Jim to tell you a little bit more about Augintel and their product and how it's helping health and human services agencies across the country. Thanks, guys.
Marty, I think you're muted.
Thanks, Natasha. That's really great context for understanding where our work fits into the broader schema of your data. And really, what we're passionate about is making the data that your staff collect usable and impactful so that it can be used to make decisions about children and families. Go back one slide, please. John, thanks. Yeah, so just a little bit about our company. We're an AI software company focused on child welfare and social services, focused on addressing problems around unstructured data. You'll see on the screen here some of the organizations that we currently work with: Hawaii, Illinois, Massachusetts, Allegheny County, Washington County, all who have a shared vision around giving staff the data they need to be informed about the children and families that they're caring for at the field level, but also at an organizational level as well. So if you go to the next slide. So delving into a bit of a problem around data. Firstly, most data collected about children and families is unstructured data, narrative data, case notes. You look at this chart on the right and you'll see that about 80% of data about children and families is unstructured, contained in reports, assessments, et cetera, et cetera. And this data really isn't used today to help make decisions, but it's our view that it really should be, because contained in this data are what's important for staff to be aware of: risks, strengths, social determinants, early warning signs, safety issues, importantly, roadblocks and impediments to permanency. It's all in the narrative, right? It's not described in the structured data. It's all what caseworkers and staff type in as their reports after they meet with families. Now, what do you do about this, right? And if you go to the next slide, how can you take this data and deliver it to staff in really straightforward ways so that they can understand what's going on? And the technology, the AI technology that's perfectly suited for this is natural language processing. Natural language processing is, essentially building computers to understand the written word. And through doing this, you can apply natural language processing, or NLP, to the critical information about children and families. Now, this can be contained in your case management systems, SACWIS, CWIS systems, medical record systems, homeless management systems, all of the different repositories of data that contain information about an individual family. Being able to extract the important insights from that data, the actionable insights from that data, is what gives staff the tools they need to maximize their ability to care for families. And I'm not going to get into the technical details. What I'll describe here is that we've taken the data that, as Natasha described, comes as part of digital transformation, and tailored it to understand the way that care is delivered, the language of child welfare, the language of social services, so that it delivers the right insights to children and families. To caseworkers and leadership. So that's a quick overview. I'm going to hand it over to Jim Lindstrom, our head of product. He's going to provide a short demonstration of our product so that you can see what it looks like, so that you can see how what might be vague concepts can be brought down to being very pragmatic and usable by staff. So with that, Jim, if you want to take control of the screen, we can start with the demo.
Sounds good. Bear with me as we transition over here. All right, I'm going to give you a demonstration of our product now, as Marty teed up. What you're looking at now is Augintel's production environment. I'm logged into a demo account, so this is all fake data that we use for trainings and demos. But this is our live product that the customers Marty mentioned of ours earlier are up and running in today. I'm going to give you a spin through this, but at a high level, there's really two parts of what I'm going to show you. The first part is oriented more toward frontline users and supervisors, and I'm going to start there just to give you a grounding. Then we're going to switch gears and show you the other side of the product. It's all the same software, just a different set of features that are more aimed at leadership and folks in central roles like quality improvement. So I'll show you that next. But first, let's just look at what our product looks like for individual caseworkers and supervisors. Right now, I'm logged into, actually, let me pause and say one or two more introductory things. This is a system we would typically launch alongside of or integrated into your existing systems that you have today. So your staff would continue to manage these cases the way that they do now. They would enter data into the systems they do now. There's no additional data burden. We, as part of our onboarding, would build integrations to wherever we're pulling that data from in your systems, pull that into our secure AWS cloud, and that then gets fed through our machine learning models and shows up in this product. There's a version of this that I'm going to demonstrate today that's very standalone. You're just going to see this in my browser, not integrated into any other systems. But for almost all of our clients, we have really done a good job integrating this into their user's experience so that this doesn't feel like it's just bolted on, like a separate product that they have to remember to use. So we can integrate with your single sign-on. We can feed data points back to your system via API. We can integrate parts of our UI into yours in an iframe. There's a lot of ways that this can feel a lot more integrated than the demo I'm going to give you now. I think that's all I'll say. Now let me dive back in. What we're looking at here is me logged in as a caseworker, and I have 12 cases assigned to me here. Each of these rows is one of those cases that we've pulled in from your source system. The content of this row might look confusing. It'll make more sense once I show you what a single case looks like. So let me click into this one and I'll show you what a typical case looks like in Augintel. Here we have on the left all of the narrative information that we have pulled in from your system or systems for this case. And if you think back to that slide Marty had with the kind of silo on the side and all of the types of narrative data, any of that could show up here. I'm going to use the word notes just as a shorthand, but these could also come from parts of a case plan, pieces of an intake form, some other system that you yourself are pulling data from and warehousing. Any of that can show up here. And in a lot of source systems we're pulling this data from, even just browsing these and like clicking into them quickly can be a real pain point, as screen load time may be several seconds. Once we've pulled this all through and fed this through our models, it's very quick to scan through, and you can see right away that one of the things we're doing is using our machine learning to highlight bits of this text and make it easier for workers to see the important parts or the risky parts or the scary parts or the things that have changed since the last month. In this view, we are showing particular focus on the risk factors and the protective factors that are showing up in these notes. So without this worker changing the way they document or explicitly tagging anything, our machine learning has automatically picked up on and tagged several different risk factors here. There's a termination of parental rights as this child is put toward adoption. There's mention of substance abuse. I guess there's a couple mentions of each of those. And then on the other side, it's highlighting in green that one of the kids' basic needs are being met as a kind of mitigating circumstance. And we can do that across the whole life of this case and use those things that we're labeling and tagging to try to tell a better story and help someone who might be new to this case immediately at a glance see what kind of family am I dealing with here? What are their needs? And how has that changed over time? So we're using that information from these notes on the left side of your screen to try to paint a picture on the right side to tell that story. So each of these lines represents one of those risks or strengths that we're seeing in this case. And it's showing you over time, so tied to these month and years at the top, how that's changed. So the bigger bubbles are showing you where there's more mention of a particular risk or strength. And just as an example, if we focus on the top line, this is the risk that's appearing the most in the case, substance use. And we can see, I think, something positive, which is there's actually less mention of this over time. So this would be how we're representing that the family has something they're struggling with, but they may actually be progressing, and maybe the work we're doing with them is helping. If I were curious to see, the last time this particular risk factor showed up, I can click anywhere over here and immediately see just the sentences that back it up. So there was one mention here of the person being in treatment. If I wanted to see the full context, that sentence comes from this note, and I can read the full note if I need to. Risks and strengths are one of the things we're detecting in these notes. There's a lot more that our AI is detecting. We're just trying not to overwhelm in this view. Another thing we're pointing out in these notes are the people that are mentioned. So if I showed this first note again, Ms. Dobson is shown in bold, and you can see there's a little tooltip next to her. What we're doing is going through these notes and just looking for mentions of people. Typically, when we pull this data from your system, there will be, a half dozen people that the worker has hand entered and says, this is such and such person, she's the mom, here's her date of birth. But the notes typically contain a huge wealth of people beyond that core set of caregivers and children. And what we're doing is going through the actual text of these notes to try to find those people, link them together, extract what we can about them, and show you what we found. So I just clicked on the text, Ms. Dobson, and our AI is saying that appears to be the same person as Laverne Dobson, Mrs. Laverne Dobson. She's the mom in this case. And we can see one of the notes mentions her as 26. Another note mentions her phone number. So if you put yourself in the eyes of a caseworker who maybe is new to this case, this is a great way to very quickly understand who all the players are, who you're trying to serve, how they relate to one another. Or if you're thinking of yourself as someone who's more experienced, you've been working this case for a while, maybe you're out in the field. Our product works just as well on mobile, even though I'm showing you the kind of full desktop view here. If you're out in the field and you know this case, this could just be a really, really quick way to find people's phone numbers on the go. Maybe you have extra time on your hand because someone no-showed and you decide you want to go visit Laverne. This is a great way to look her up. Or maybe you're in court and a question is asked about her. This is a quick way to navigate to her notes. I'm going to switch on the right side to this people tab. This is where we're cataloging all of the people we found in this case, and on a similar timeline showing you where in these notes they appear, and summarizing any of the information we've extracted about them. So if I wanted to see, for instance, the 3-year-old, I could look at just the notes where she appears. Oops, I think I'm still filtered by time here. There we go. But this can be a really powerful tool for family finding. Some of our clients are using this to try to avoid putting kids in a very strained foster care system where they may have limited number of placements, plus that's more disruptive. This can be a great way to find, that aunt in the next county over, or that adult sibling somewhere that, hadn't been mentioned in the notes for months, and maybe the new caseworker doesn't know about them. The thing I guess I haven't done here yet actually is what we see people using the most in this side of the product. Again, this is really targeting frontline users, is just searching. a lot of times, I think until now, notes have been viewed as really for compliance or for court or for anyone except the frontline worker. What we're trying to do is give them on the front line tools to use the documentation they've written to get their work done more quickly, to save them time when they're summarizing the family for the next court hearing, or when they're writing up a note to refer them to some service provider and they have to summarize the family's needs. Just being able to search these notes, if I knew nothing else except that there was substance abuse in this case and I searched drug, we had built what we think is the only kind of natural language search product specifically built for social services. Returning the word drug is not a huge surprise here, but a lot of SACWIS systems can't even do that. But if I collapse this first section, you can see we're also pulling in all kinds of related terminology that I might not have thought to search for: toxicology, misuse, substances, methadone. And I can very quickly go back and find information if I needed to see mom's last, clean date, or her next, methadone treatment date, or things like that. So just being able to search these notes quickly, effectively, and in a very natural language way, I think is one of the biggest value props here.
And I'll add that, we'll cover this a bit more in the results section of this webinar, but as we know, staff are asked to go dig for data all the time. And many of our customers say that staff spend up to 5 hours a week digging through notes one by one by one to get the right information they need for the attorney, for the judge, for the family. This search capability, right, giving you the same kind of search capability that you're used to on the internet, is saving staff 5 hours per week. And we know we are never going to be able to catch up with the demand that the system puts on us from how many families we need to help. So giving that administrative time back to staff so that they can spend it with families, this is just a very straightforward, pragmatic example of how to do that.
I'm going to wrap up the first part of our product demo here and switch gears and show you the second part. So there's a lot more capabilities here focused on frontline use, but I'm going to click this link at the top that says queries and show you the other side of this product. This is leveraging all the same underlying technology you just saw, but kind of at a different zoom level, if you will. This part of the product is more an attempt to give your leadership, your quality teams, and others early warning dashboards to watch for very specific patterns and see how your agency's performance or levels of risk is trending over time. So each of these tiles that you're seeing here is what we call a query, and it's you can think of it as kind of a little robot that's reading every single one of your notes in real time, looking for a specific issue, and it's able to help give you a trend line and show you how you're doing there. If I click into the actual cases here, we can drill down and see which cases meet this criteria. And then we can also set this to alert frontline staff if you wish to make them aware of something. So some of these things you may, as a leadership team, just want to know and count and report on. But some of these may be issues where you actually want to nudge workers and say, hey, we're noticing condition X where you should have done Y. We're not seeing Y. Let's send an alert to that frontline worker. I'm going to show you a couple of these, and I think you'll quickly get the capability. But one thing I want to point out is this part of the product is meant to be kind of flexible, customizable. You can think of it as like business intelligence, but where the raw data is text instead of structured fields. So we have a huge library of these. I'm just going to show you a few, but we're also building these out anew all the time with customers when they come to us and say, hey, one of our strategies is we're focused on X. This is something we'd like to improve about our practice model. Can you help us just measure this and put in the feedback loop? So don't think you're limited to what I'm going to show you. These are just kind of illustrative examples. Let me show you the top right one here. I think this is a good, easy entry point. A lot of our clients today have some goal around sleep safety. So if they have cases where the families have infants, they want to make sure those infants are sleeping separately from the parents, so they're not co-sleeping, and they want to make sure the crib is safe and not cluttered with blankets and whatnot. Typically, our clients, before they come to us, don't have a lot of tools to actually execute on that kind of a strategy, though. They may have a mandatory new hire training that talks about what to do. Maybe there's some posters all on the wall in the break room. But at the end of the year, most of those agencies are left to kind of pick a handful of cases, 20, 50, review them by hand, and hope that that is representative of how things are going. But they're definitely not able to find outliers in real time. And they're definitely not able to do this across, more than just a small sampling of cases. What we're offering clients here is the ability to say, this is important to us. We want to use Augintel to measure it. We want to be able to tell across all of our cases at any point in time how we're doing. And we want to nudge workers when there's an opportunity in real time. We don't just want to shame them at the end of the month or at case closing. We want them to know when they can actually do something about it, that they have an opportunity to do so. A couple of our clients have used this query to drive down the kind of out of compliance cases, if you will, by something like 30%, essentially for free. They basically just worked with us to turn this on, let their workers know that it was on, and then let the alerts drive a change in behavior that meaningfully brought down the number of kids that were sleeping in unsafe situations. And to kind of pop the hood on that, under the hood, all we're really doing here is looking for all of your active cases and then using our NLP to say which ones of those cases involve infants. And then of those, we expect them to mention that either the family's already sleeping safely or they're not, but we talked about it and made an intervention. Which of the cases involving infants don't have that kind of documentation? So we're just using our NLP to kind of combine a couple different criteria and then send an alert to let workers know. I'll show one other example here and then probably wrap it up here and let Marty continue. This worker safety one is a very different type of query that I'll also highlight. In this case, what we're looking at is the safety of your staff. So not of the children and family they're serving necessarily, but think about investigators who are heading out to a home for the first time. There could be, dogs in the home that have bit the last 3 caseworkers. There could be known, weapons in the home that are not well stored. There could be criminal, history issues with the family participants. Those are all things that the current case or some previous linked case may have documentation about, but which overworked investigators often don't have the time to go read up on. So what we're doing in this query is essentially when a case transfers or reopens, sending the assigned worker an alert if there's documentation that mentions any of the things I just mentioned. At the risk of scanning my URLs in real time here, I will pull up an example of one of these. This is an actual email we sent to one of our users, whenever this date was, about 18 months ago, telling them that a case to which they had just been assigned had 4 or 5 mentions here of guns in the home. This is, again, information that caseworker probably wouldn't have had the time to go research themselves and could influence how they go to that home. Maybe they bring their supervisor with them. Maybe they, go during daylight. There's a lot of ways they could use this information to feel better supported and make better choices for themselves. There's a ton of different use cases here. I'll just kind of breeze through a few other categories. We have a lot of clients using this around audit or kind of performance improvement plan items they might have within the child welfare space. That could be, a child and family safety review, and you end up with 3 or 4 things that you need to show improvement on. We have several clients using this capability to help improve that way. There may be kind of specialists you have that are serving specific populations, parenting teens or kids with specific medical conditions. This can be a great way to find those families and make sure you're serving all of them. A number of our clients are using this to find families with vision or hearing issues or language translation needs, and have said they found 20-30% more families that otherwise would have fallen through the cracks. The last thing I'll highlight here is just documentation issues. I think a lot of our clients are able to find where there are no notes in some time period, but that's a pretty, blunt instrument. It's much harder to find where notes are short or lacking, or 3-4 notes in a row that don't touch on a specific topic, like the schooling or medical well-being of the kids. These are all things that we can help detect and sort of put feedback loops around. I think I'll wrap up here and hand the screen back to John and maybe hand the slides back to Marty.
Thanks. And as I think is clear here is that this provides the ability to take action based on data in real time proactively, right? If you are a leader or if you're on the front lines and you want to make decisions that have impact in real time, getting access to the right data is critical. And this is just one example of that in the broader context of digital transformation. So the last part of our presentation before we get to Q&A will be from John Velasquez. We've looked at NLP as a high impact step in general in digital transformation. He'll provide a few examples of how this can be extended across health and human services, as well as finish up with a specific NLP case study. So with that, John, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks, Marty. Natasha led us off by helping us understand what digital transformation is and how you can start your journey and what some best practices are for that. And then, Marty and Jim shows an example of how Augintel is making transformation a reality for child welfare caseworkers through the application of natural language processing, taking a really complex set of unstructured data and turning it into incredibly useful insights into risk factors and mitigating strengths, that may exist in a child or children's homes, and presenting them in a way that is digestible, understandable, and able to be used to support what really are complex decisions that can affect multiple lives. So what Augintel has done is indeed transformational. For my portion of the presentation, I'm going to attempt to demonstrate how states should consider this capability as an essential element of all their modernization to transformation initiatives, and consider that there are other technologies that can similarly impact their ability to transform. And what's really incredible about what Augintel has done is it really doesn't take a change in a child welfare system in order to reap these benefits. You can do those right away. So in order to do this for you, I'm going to start by laying some context. So I'm going to start with reviewing what's called the Human Services Value Curve, which was developed by Harvard Technology and Entrepreneurship Center for a Network World. This model, kind of when coupled and combined with some tools developed by APSA, the American Public Human Services Association, are frequently used to provide a roadmap for improving human services outcomes and values. What your mission-driven HHS organizations are really after. So what this does is show progression across 4 models. The first is regulative. Unfortunately, I think many states find themselves here, sort of burdened by those siloed monolithic systems that Natasha talked about, designed to achieve program compliance, but not focused on the constituent or necessarily on outcomes like lifting a family out of crisis. The second is collaborative. So this is where programs work to cut across program boundaries towards a one door for participants' experience. Think customer portal, and for the more advanced, where constituents can submit their information once and use it to apply for multiple benefits. The next is integrative. And under this model, products and services are combined in packages designed to input or with input or feedback from constituents, and are delivered in the most convenient and effective ways, leading to improved outcomes beyond those achieved in prior models. And then the final is generative. And under this model, those providing products and services are combining efforts to make the consumer's overall environment better, resulting in value that's broader and more systemic than that an individual or family might achieve. In terms of insights beyond those provided by the models themselves, the center is clear to call out these key insights. 1, progression up this value curve as an agency, community, or an entire system is transformative at each stage of transition and evolution. So you need to approach this as a journey and not as a one and done. But this second one is really what I'm getting at. the progression up the curve often calls for improved data sharing, integrated cross-organization workflows, and adaptive design and funding mechanisms. So in that improved data sharing and integrated cross-organization workflows, the root of this is how are you going to share data? Who should be able to access data? Under what circumstances should you be able to access that data? And then how do you make decisions based on that data? All things that Augintel was able to demonstrate for you. So you see progress across these models is going to require the ability to deliver insights-driven presentations fueled by vast amounts of data aggregated over time, tailored to different users, presenting enough context so that you understand their role in the bigger picture, and know what they need to know and know what they need to know to design and deliver their services, while also protecting the family's rights, factoring in consent, and remaining in compliance with various federal and state regulations and agency privacy policies. I think you can see that this whole person, whole family view that Augintel provides is useful not just through the lens of child welfare, but in terms of helping address a host of other initiatives, such as poverty reduction. How can we better understand everything that's going on in a family, better assess whether our strategies, programs are effective as they should be? Or improving mental health. We all know that the most effective way to treat mental health disorders involves a multidisciplinary team, all sharing information and coordinating care. Or combating substance use and abuse. It's also effective if we take into consideration all the stressors that may be driving the behavior and coordinate efforts to address as many contributing factors in a coordinated manner, such as housing, food, health, and job or work insecurity, as well as addressing the behavioral and home support aspects. Again, an Augintel-like presentation of this information could be incredibly helpful in this type of initiative. And reading the slide, you can see that the same is true when combating homelessness. So all can benefit from a solution like Augintel, much in the way that the Illinois Department of Children and Family Services has. By applying Augintel's solution, caseworkers now are able to pull insights buried in mounds of narrative data almost instantaneously, just as they demonstrated. They're able to search and find information buried in narrative fields, such as every instance where drug is mentioned. That's an example they showed you. And then Illinois DCFS estimates they're saving 20% of the time on administrative tasks through the deployment of that technology. And caseworker testimonials indicate that caseworkers believe they're making better informed decisions. And if you look at those two examples that I pulled over to the side, they did cover these, but I think they deserve, a second look. How important is it, to be able to identify cases where we're seeing a lack of goal setting and service planning, or being able to detect that there are worker safety issues and have that sort of send an alert before a caseworker heads out to a home. These are hugely impactful, hugely important. But there's also more work to do. So caseworkers remain overburdened getting investigation and visits detail into the case file. So an example of where more technology can be applied, we can and should do better about this. We have the technology at AWS to be able to take that video and audio captured on mobile devices and process it and get it indexed into the file. Audio transcribed to narrative, translation when called for, content mapped into the case file, all prepared for Augintel type processing. And with that, I'll open it up to questions. And I see that we have one already. Can this work with both my legacy system and future systems, such as if we transition to CWIS?
I'll take that one. The answer to that is yes. So digital transformation is a process. And if you have a bit of technology that only works after it's all said and done, then it's a non-starter. So in our case at Augintel, because the data is exported to Augintel and there's not a lot of back and forth, it makes it pretty straightforward. So should an organization have a legacy system, we integrate with that. And then upon the transition to CWIS, we just point Augintel over to the new CWIS system. And we're doing that with several of our customers today. So yes, backwards compatibility, very important. Getting value from your data today, whether it's a legacy system or a modern CWIS system, both can happen.
Fantastic. Thanks, Marty. Okay, a second question. How long does it take to deploy Augintel, and what resources are required by my organization to support that work?
Sure. So Natasha hit on this a bit, is modularity, being able to not have these monolithic systems that take years to build is an important piece of digital transformation. And in our case, it takes about 6 months to onboard Augintel, and there are really 3 phases of this project. The first is business discovery, so where we learn how your care is delivered and how best to configure Augintel to align with those processes. The second is integration, right? Connecting data from your system to our system. And then the final piece is the AI piece. So training that data, taking your historical data. And when I say training, I'm training the computer to understand the language of your organization so that it can help find that data moving forward. That takes about 6 months. And from a resource requirement, we tend at our company to do most of the heavy lifting ourselves. So we really require, depending on the phase of the project, 1 to 2 staff people for an hour a week. And that's what we need as a checkpoint to make sure that we're on the right track. Once we start training staff, it gets a little bit more, more staff is required to get trained, of course, and do the train the trainer work. But in the beginning, it's pretty lightweight, right? And we found from our customers that they're very happy that it's not an overburdening of their staff to deploy a system like this.
Marty, this one I think is also for you. This is from Brian at New York State OCFS IS.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a reluctance for states to abandon their old ways of reviewing case history because of a fear that the technology is missing something and the liability that would come with that? Has this subsided?
Sure. Jim, I'll hand that over to you because I think people might be sick of me talking and you might have a different perspective as well, but I'll hand it over to you.
I think that's a totally fair question. I think in practice, though, it is not a fear we encounter that much. I think most agencies are doing a good job promoting their case management into leadership. And so the leadership knows staff is really, really overburdened. It's not as though they're able today to make use of all of the data they have. There's massive staff turnover. Most of the staff is operating with very little experience and it needs all the help they can get. And so I think there's an understanding that the baseline today is not that staff are reading every single note and now they might not be. I think the baseline is staff are just barely getting by, and this will make them better informed, even if it does miss a thing here or there. I think most of our clients' leadership realize their staff are just massively under-resourced today and under-invested in from an IT perspective, and value literally any help they can get.
Yeah, Jim, I think, oh, sorry, Marty.
No, go ahead, John, please.
I was just going to say, I think the projects that AWS has worked with you on, one thing that we picked up on is that the fact that you use frontline caseworkers to actually do some of that upfront work, that Marty, you were talking about, goes a long way, in building confidence in what the system is presenting.
Mhm.
Any more comments on that one? Okay, then there's one more question, and actually I think we can address it as a two-part. Given all we hear about generative AI, what's the difference between Augintel and what Gen AI does?
And I've actually written about this in the past. We've all, over the last year and a half, have seen all of the activity and hype around generative AI, which is really the ability of computers to create content for whoever's using the tool. If you take a sort of a look at it a little bit more sort of with a fine-tooth comb, what's happening in the system, in the generative AI systems, is the first 80% of what's going on behind the scenes is identifying the important information that the individual should be aware of. And the last 20% is taking that information that was identified and reconstructing it into a summary about that data. So when we think about generative AI, we think we're doing the first 80% of it already. We are identifying that critical information. Now, as we think about what we build next, we're carefully considering whether we want to take our technology and extend it to the generative sort of arena where we're creating notes, where we're creating reports, and we're in the sort of thinking and exploration stage. And there will be some customers that say, listen, I think that if you could have a tool that, creates a first draft of a report so that my staff don't have to spend so much time creating their quarterly reports or their supervisor reports, great. But there are other organizations that say, listen, if there's something that needs to be created for the record, I want that staff person writing it based both on their own knowledge as well as the knowledge from the historical data. And it's really a decision for individual organizations to make. But really, sort of just to wrap a bow around this, we're doing the hard work already in identifying the critical information. And what comes next is, what you're going to see and have the option to use over the next few years.
Yep. How are we doing on time? Do we have time for one more question, or are we?
We're at the very end, but if there are any questions that are in the chat or in the Q&A, I'd be willing to take one or two more. Sure.
I think it's fine. There's one actually for Natasha. Is just how important will Gen AI be to transformation, which I think is the broadening of the question that Marty answered.
Sure, and I think Marty did a great job answering that question, honestly, and that's really what we observe and what we see. We want to make sure that we're not getting ahead of our skis here on this. We want to make sure that organizations are prepared to govern their data and govern that generation of information really effectively. We're seeing some risky behavior out there, I think, occasionally, with just randomly pulling in publicly made or maybe unresponsible models on occasion and letting people sort of run with them where the output is consequential. We have to be very, very thoughtful and careful. The AWS approach has really been to take those models and bring them to the data, make sure that we have secure and responsible ways of governing that data and governing the generation of information, especially with sensitive public information or private information, PII, PHI, things that the government really owns and that citizens have trusted the government with. And so our approach has really been around that. And I do think it will be important as we move forward to transformation. There are lots of ways that we're seeing Gen AI help with the transformation, with code rewriting as we refactor systems and applications, or database migrations as we move from old legacy, monoliths back into this new modular way of developing and advancing modularity in the cloud. And so there are lots and lots of ways where Gen AI has been incredibly effective and is less risky, frankly, than putting consequential information or using large language models that AWS is pioneering and leading with, and has been very, very effective. Code Whisperer and Q and some of the things that we've put out there are really helpful for the transformation and much less risky in some ways than trying to decide where and when you're going to apply LLMs that may or may not have been trained as responsibly. So anyhow, I'll leave it at that and just say, yes, of course, it will be important for transformation. We're already seeing it, and there are a lot of ways that we can help use it today that are very safe and secure. And certainly that has been the AWS approach to doing that.
Great. Marty, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
Well, thank you, everybody, today. Thank you, Natasha, John, Jim, and everybody on the call for today for taking the time to learn a bit more. I think we'll be sending out a recording of this meeting, and you're welcome to follow up with us about any questions you have, and have a nice rest of the week.